Most people waste years of their life being managed by people who aren't qualified to manage a parking lot. Here's what nobody tells you. Idiots don't look like idiots. They show up as your boss, your friend, your partner, your family member. They come disguised as advice, as concern, as opportunity, and the moment you let your guard down, they've already rented space inside your head, shaped your decisions, and quietly rewired what you believe is possible for you. Today, I'm going to hand you the exact mental tools to identify them early, exit cleanly, and protect the one thing they're always targeting: your focus. Let me tell you something that took most people in this room probably a decade to figure out, and some of you still haven't. The dangerous ones, the people who drain your energy, derail your goals, and quietly sabotage your progress. They don't announce themselves. They never walk in wearing a sign. They don't introduce themselves as a problem. They show up as the loudest supporter in the room. They show up as the person with all the advice. They show up as the one who always has an opinion about your life while their own life is quietly falling apart in the background. The first skill you need, before boundaries, before exit strategies, before any of that, is pattern recognition. Not people judgment, not cynicism, pattern recognition. There is a difference. Judgment is emotional. Recognition is clinical. And the moment you start seeing behavior as data instead of personal interaction, everything changes. You stop taking things personally. You start taking things seriously. Here's what the pattern actually looks like. It starts subtle. It always starts subtle. There is a consistency in how certain people respond to your wins. Watch that. Most people celebrate with you on the surface, but there is a specific type of person who cannot sit comfortably in your success. Something in them shifts. The energy changes. Suddenly there is a but. Suddenly there is a concern. Suddenly they are reminding you of a risk you hadn't thought about, a problem on the horizon, a reason why this might not work out the way you think. They dress it up as wisdom. They package it as care. But what it actually is noise designed to pull you back to their level. The second part of the pattern is how they respond to your boundaries. Healthy people, when you say no, when you pull back, when you protect your time, they adjust. They respect it. They might not love it, but they respect it. The other type, they escalate. They guilt. They reframe your boundary as an attack on them. Suddenly, you setting a limit becomes you being selfish, cold, difficult, or changed. That reaction right there is one of the clearest signals in human behavior. Normal people don't punish you for having standards. Only people who were benefiting from your lack of standards do that. Now here is where it gets interesting, and this is the part most people miss completely. Your nervous system already knows. Your body has been registering these patterns long before your conscious mind catches up. You have felt it. That low-level tension before a phone call with a specific person, that exhaustion after a conversation that should have been simple, that quiet dread when you see a name light up on your phone. That is not anxiety. That is not you being sensitive. That is your threat detection system doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem is most of us were trained to override it. We were told to be polite, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to assume positive intent. And while that sounds emotionally mature, what it actually does in practice is train you to ignore your own intelligence. Pattern recognition means you start trusting that intelligence again. It means you stop requiring a dramatic event, a betrayal, a blow-up before you give yourself permission to protect yourself. You don't need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You need a consistent pattern of behavior that costs you something: your peace, your time, your momentum, your clarity. The moment you see that pattern repeating, that is your data. That is your signal. The people who never get better at this are the ones who keep waiting for the other person to change. They keep extending grace, keep giving chances, keep believing that this time will be different. And here is what Chase Hughes would tell you straight. You are not a rehabilitation center. You are not responsible for someone else's self-awareness. Your job is not to fix the pattern. Your job is to recognize it fast enough that it never gets deep enough to cost you something you cannot get back. There is a war happening right now, and most people don't even know they're in it. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It doesn't show up on the news. It happens in the quiet moments of your day. in conversations that go nowhere, in decisions you keep second guessing, in the mental loops that run at 2 in the morning when you should be sleeping. The war is for your attention. And the frightening part is that most of the people stealing it from you don't even know they're doing it. They're not evil. They're not plotting against you. They're just unconscious. And unconscious people in your life are expensive. Your mental bandwidth is not unlimited. Every neuroscientist, every performance researcher, every behavioral psychologist will tell you the same thing. The human brain has a finite capacity for high quality thinking in a given day. That capacity is your most valuable resource, more valuable than your money, more valuable than your time, because money can be made back. Time is debatable. But the quality of your thinking, your ability to solve problems, make decisions, create, build, and move forward, that runs on a fuel that drains fast and restores slowly. And the wrong people in your life are running that tank empty before you even start your day. Here is how it actually happens. It doesn't happen in one big dramatic moment. It happens in accumulation. It's the text message that pulls you out of deep focus. It's the conversation that plants a seed of doubt about a decision you already made. It's the person who brings you their chaos disguised as a need for advice, downloads their anxiety into your mind, and then walks away feeling lighter while you sit there carrying something that was never yours to carry. Each one of those interactions costs you something neurologically. Each one pulls processing power away from the things that actually matter. And when you add them up across a day, across a week, across a year, you start to understand why some people feel like they're always busy but never actually moving forward. The people who drain your bandwidth fall into recognizable categories. There is the crisis manufacturer, the person whose life is always on fire, always urgent, always requiring your immediate emotional response. There is the doubt installer, the one who doesn't attack your ideas directly, but asks just enough questions to make you feel uncertain about what you were perfectly clear on 5 minutes ago. There is the circular talker, the person who brings you the same problem repeatedly, never applies anything you offer, and somehow always leaves the conversation needing more from you. Each of these types operates differently on the surface but accomplishes the same thing underneath. They consume your mental resources without generating any return. What makes this dangerous is that most of us were wired to be responsive. We were rewarded as children for being helpful, attentive, and available. That wiring runs deep. So when someone pulls on your attention, something in you responds automatically before you even make a conscious choice. That automatic response is what needs to be interrupted, not with coldness, not with walls, but with awareness, a deliberate pause between the stimulus and your reaction where you ask one simple question. Does engaging with this move anything forward, or does it just feel urgent because someone else made it urgent? Protecting your mental bandwidth is not about becoming unavailable. It is about becoming intentional. It is about understanding that every yes you give to someone else's noise is a no you are giving to your own clarity. The highest performers in any field, the ones who consistently produce at a level that looks almost unreasonable to everyone around them, they are not smarter. They are not more talented. What they have that most people don't is protected cognitive space. They have created environments, habits, and relationship filters that keep the drain low and the signal high. Your focus is not just a productivity tool, it is the thing your entire future is being built on. Every goal you have, every version of yourself you are trying to become, every problem you are trying to solve, all of it requires sustained, high-quality attention over time. The moment you treat that attention as something anyone can access at any time for any reason, you have already handed over the most important thing you own. Nobody teaches you how to leave. Think about that for a second. We spend years learning how to enter things, how to start relationships, how to join teams, how to begin conversations, how to show up. But the exit? That part gets left out completely. And because nobody teaches it, most people handle exits the worst possible way. They either blow things up dramatically, burning every bridge in sight just to feel like they had some control, or they stay too long, quietly absorbing damage, telling themselves it will get better, waiting for a moment of clarity that never comes. Both of those are expensive. Both of those cost you something. And both of them are completely avoidable when you understand that exiting cleanly is a skill. And like every skill, it can be learned. The first thing you need to understand about the exit strategy is that timing is everything. Most people wait for a crisis to justify leaving. They need a big enough reason, a final straw, something they can point to and say, "That is why I left." That need for justification is deeply human, but it is also deeply costly. Because by the time the final straw arrives, you have already absorbed hundreds of smaller straws that have been quietly compressing you for months, sometimes years. You don't need a dramatic event to justify protecting yourself. A consistent pattern of depletion is reason enough. A relationship or dynamic that consistently costs you more than it returns is reason enough. Waiting for the explosion means you are already inside the blast radius. The second thing you need to understand is that most people make exits emotional when they should make them structural. An emotional exit looks like a confrontation, a long conversation, a final argument where you try to make the other person understand what they did wrong. And that impulse makes complete sense. You want acknowledgement. You want them to see it. You want the closure that comes from someone finally getting it. But here is the hard truth that most people spend years learning the painful way. People who operate at a low level of self-awareness cannot give you the closure you are looking for. They don't have the internal tools. You will leave that conversation more frustrated than when you entered it, and now they have something new to react to, something new to make about themselves, something new to use against you. A structural exit is different. A structural exit means you quietly, deliberately, and without announcement begin reducing access. You stop volunteering information, you become less available without making your unavailability a statement. You respond slower, engage shorter, invest less, not out of anger, not out of punishment, but out of simple resource management. You are redirecting your energy toward things that actually generate a return. The beauty of a structural exit is that it requires no confrontation, no explanation, and no permission. You do not need the other person to agree that you should leave. You do not need them to understand. You just need to move. Now here is where most people trip up even when they understand all of this. The guilt. That quiet voice that says you are being cold, you are being unfair, you are abandoning someone who needs you. That voice is not your conscience. That voice is your conditioning. It is years of being rewarded for selflessness and penalized for boundaries talking. Real conscience protects everyone, including yourself. Conditioning tells you that your comfort, your peace, and your growth are less important than someone else's access to you. Learning to tell the difference between those two voices is one of the most important things you will ever do. The exit strategy is also about what you are exiting toward, not just what you are exiting from. Every clean exit creates space. Space in your schedule, space in your mental bandwidth, space in your emotional capacity, and that space is not empty. It is potential. It is room for something better, something aligned, something that actually matches the direction you are trying to move in. The people who exit cleanly and deliberately don't just lose a drain, they gain acceleration. They suddenly find themselves moving faster, thinking clearer, feeling lighter in a way they didn't even realize was possible because they had been carrying that weight for so long it started to feel like their natural state. The most powerful boundaries are the ones nobody ever sees coming. That sounds counterintuitive at first because most of what we hear about boundaries is loud. It is the conversation, the declaration, the moment where you sit someone down and explain what you will and will not tolerate. And while that approach has its place, it also has a fatal flaw. The moment you announce a boundary to a low awareness person, you have handed them a map. You have shown them exactly where your edges are. And the kind of person who needs to be told where your edges are is almost always the exact kind of person who will spend their time testing them. Invisible boundaries work differently. They operate beneath the surface of any interaction. They are built into your behavior, your patterns, your availability, and your responses in ways that shape every dynamic around you without ever requiring a single direct statement. The other person feels the effect without ever being able to identify the cause. And that is exactly where you want to be, influencing the dynamic from a position they cannot challenge because they cannot see it clearly enough to argue with it. The foundation of invisible boundaries is what behavioral scientists call response latency. It is simply how quickly you respond to people and situations. Most people respond at maximum speed to everyone equally: the urgent text, the demanding colleague, the friend who needs something right now. And what that pattern communicates without a single word is that your attention is always available, always immediate, always free. When you begin varying your response latency deliberately and selectively, faster with people who respect your time, slower with people who consume it, you start sending signals that reshape how people approach you without ever having a direct conversation about it. They calibrate to you without knowing they are doing it. The second layer of invisible boundaries is information control. Most people dramatically overshare. They fill silence with details, explain their decisions without being asked, justify their choices to people who have no authority over those choices. Every unnecessary piece of information you volunteer is leverage you are handing to someone else. Invisible boundaries mean you become selectively private, not secretive, not cold, but intentionally minimal, with personal details, plans, and emotional states around people who have demonstrated they cannot handle that information responsibly. You share less not because you are hiding something, but because you understand that information is currency and not everyone in your life has earned access to your full account. The third layer is what I call emotional non-reaction. This is perhaps the most powerful invisible boundary that exists. When a low awareness person cannot get an emotional reaction from you, cannot make you defensive, cannot make you over-explain, cannot make you visibly frustrated, they lose their primary tool for managing the dynamic. Most difficult people operate by triggering emotional responses and then using those responses to control the narrative, shift blame, or simply feel powerful. The moment you stop providing that reaction, the entire mechanism breaks down. Not because you are suppressing your emotions internally, but because you have trained yourself to respond from a place of calm deliberateness rather than automatic reaction. That stillness is invisible, but it is felt immediately, and it fundamentally changes how people engage with you. Invisible boundaries also require you to understand the concept of selective engagement. Not every question deserves a full answer. Not every provocation deserves a response. Not every invitation requires your attendance. Most people treat every social demand as an obligation and respond accordingly, exhausting themselves trying to meet expectations that were never legitimate in the first place. Selective engagement means you begin filtering participation based on return rather than obligation. You show up fully where it matters, and you become quietly, consistently unavailable where it doesn't. Not with excuses, not with explanations, but simply with a pattern of presence and absence that over time redefines what people expect from you. What makes all of this work at the deepest level is congruence. Invisible boundaries only hold when your internal state matches your external behavior. The moment there is a gap between what you feel and how you act, people sense it, not consciously, but in that instinctive way, humans read each other below the level of words. When you are genuinely unbothered, genuinely selective, genuinely operating from a place of internal clarity about what you will and will not allow into your space, that energy radiates outward and creates a field around you that the wrong people simply find it difficult to penetrate. There is a version of you that has been trained by the wrong people. That is not an insult. That is just an honest observation about how human beings work. From the moment you were old enough to interact with the world, you began learning how to respond to it. Every reaction you received, every consequence that followed your behavior, every dynamic you were repeatedly exposed to, all of it was quietly writing code in your nervous system. Code that runs automatically. Code that fires before your conscious mind even has a chance to weigh in. And for most people, a significant portion of that code was written by exactly the kind of people this entire speech is about. Low awareness, high drain individuals who taught you that their comfort mattered more than your clarity. That code shows up in very specific ways. It shows up as the automatic apology, the sorry that comes out of your mouth before you have even assessed whether you did anything wrong. It shows up as the over-explanation, the three-paragraph justification for a one-sentence decision. It shows up as the freeze, that moment when someone says something unreasonable and instead of responding with confidence, you go blank, you shrink, you feel suddenly small in a way that makes no logical sense given who you are and what you know. These are not personality traits. These are conditioned responses. And conditioned responses can be reprogrammed. The difference between reacting and responding is not just semantic, it is neurological. A reaction is automatic. It bypasses your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for judgment, reasoning, and intentional decision-making, and fires straight from your amygdala, your threat detection center. It is fast, it is emotional, and it is almost always shaped by your history rather than your present reality. A response is deliberate. It travels through your higher thinking centers, gets filtered through your actual values and intentions, and arrives as something you chose rather than something that happened to you. The goal is not to eliminate your automatic reactions entirely. The goal is to insert enough space between the trigger and the output that you are the one deciding what comes next. Here is how you begin building that space in real time. The moment you feel a reaction rising, the defensiveness, the guilt, the urge to over-explain, the impulse to immediately fix someone else's emotional state, you pause. Not a dramatic pause, not a pause that signals to the other person that something is happening, a quiet internal pause that lasts just long enough for your prefrontal cortex to come back online. In that pause, you ask yourself one question: is this response mine, or is this a program running from someone else's influence? That question alone, practiced consistently, begins to create a separation between who you actually are and the conditioned version of you that learned to survive around difficult people. Reprogramming your response also means deliberately exposing yourself to discomfort in low-stakes situations so that high-stakes situations stop feeling catastrophic. Most people avoid small discomforts constantly. They change the subject, they deflect, they laugh things off, they agree when they don't actually agree. And every time you do that, you are reinforcing the neural pathway that says discomfort is dangerous and must be avoided at all costs. When you start sitting in small discomforts intentionally, holding eye contact a beat longer than feels natural, letting silence exist without rushing to fill it, saying no to something minor without offering a reason, you are literally rewiring your nervous system's threat response. You are teaching your brain through repeated experience that discomfort is not the same as danger. The people in your life who operate at a low level are counting on your old programming. They have learned, consciously or not, exactly which buttons produce which responses in you. They know how to trigger the guilt. They know how to activate the people-pleasing. They know how to make you feel responsible for their emotional state. That knowledge is their leverage. And the moment you reprogram your responses, the moment the buttons stop producing the expected outputs, that leverage disappears completely. They push the button and nothing happens. They escalate and you remain steady. They create urgency and you move at your own pace. That steadiness is not coldness and it is not indifference. It is the clearest possible signal that you are now operating from your own internal system rather than the one they helped install. You will become the average of the people who have the most access to you, not the people you admire from a distance, not the people you follow online, not the mentors you have never met whose books sit on your shelf. The people who actually get into your space, who get your time, your attention, your unguarded moments, your real thoughts, your fears, your plans, your energy, those people are shaping you whether you are conscious of it or not. That is not motivational language. That is neuroscience. Mirror neurons, social contagion, behavioral entrainment, the research is overwhelming and consistent. Human beings unconsciously synchronize with the people they spend the most time around. Their speech patterns, their risk tolerance, their emotional baseline, their beliefs about what is possible, all of it drifts toward the people in closest proximity, which means your inner circle is not just a social preference, it is a developmental environment. And like any environment, it either accelerates your growth or quietly limits it. Most people build their inner circle by accident. They keep the friends they made when they were a different version of themselves. They maintain relationships out of history rather than alignment. They stay connected to people simply because those people have always been there, because cutting them loose feels disloyal, feels arrogant, feels like a statement about who you think you are now versus who you used to be. And that feeling is understandable, but it is also one of the most expensive feelings you will ever indulge. Loyalty to history at the expense of alignment to your future is not virtue. It is a slow, invisible ceiling that keeps getting lower the longer you leave it in place. Building your inner circle like a filter means getting ruthlessly honest about what each relationship is actually doing to your trajectory. Not what it used to do, not what it might do if things change, what it is doing right now, consistently, over time. And that assessment has to go beyond whether you like the person, whether they are a good person, whether they have been there for you in the past. Those things matter, but they are not the only metrics. The real question is directional. Does time with this person move you forward, hold you in place, or pull you backward? That question applied consistently to every relationship in your life will show you things that are uncomfortable to see but impossible to unsee once you have seen them. The filter works on multiple levels. The first level is energy, who leaves you more alive after an interaction and who leaves you depleted. The second level is mindset, who expands your sense of what is possible and who consistently shrinks it with their skepticism, their fear, their need to keep you in a version of yourself that is comfortable for them. The third level is behavior, who is actually doing something with their life, who is in motion, who is building, who is solving, who is growing in a direction that challenges you by proximity alone. All three levels matter. A person can be energizing but directionless. A person can be ambitious but toxic in their energy. The filter is multidimensional, and it requires you to look at the whole picture rather than defaulting to the one dimension that feels easiest to assess.